Marcus Chen was nobody special, and he had made peace with that a long time ago. He worked as a hydroponic technician on Kepler Station, a massive structure that floated in the darkness between stars. And his job was simple: keep the algae vats alive so the station could breathe and eat. Every morning, he woke up in his small apartment, drank his synthetic coffee, and walked through gray corridors to gray rooms where green slime bubbled in glass tanks. Every evening he came home, heated a meal packet, and sat on his balcony to watch the ships come and go. The balcony was not really a balcony in the Earth sense of the word, but rather a small observation alcove with a thick window that looked out into space. And Marcus loved it more than anything else he owned. He would sit there for hours, watching freighters and cruisers drift past, their lights blinking against the endless black. And he would think about his life and how it had led him here. His wife had died 6 years ago from a sickness that Earth medicine could cure, but that he could not afford. And after that, he had sold everything and bought a one-way ticket to the furthest place he could find. Kepler Station was that place. A neutral trading hub where humans and aliens mixed together in an uneasy dance of commerce and survival. And Marcus had found a strange kind of comfort in its anonymity. Nobody here knew him or cared about his past. And that was exactly what he wanted on the night everything changed. Marcus came home later than usual because one of the algae vats had developed a contamination, and he had spent 3 extra hours cleaning it out. He was tired and hungry, and his back ached from bending over the tanks. And all he wanted was to sit on his balcony and watch the stars until his eyes grew heavy. But when he stepped into his apartment and walked to the observation window, he found something waiting for him. It was small, no bigger than a house cat, and it was curled up in the corner of his balcony alcove where the heating vent blew warm. At first, Marcus thought his eyes were playing tricks on him because the creature seemed to shift colors as he looked at it, its scales moving between deep black and rich violet like oil on water. Then it lifted its head and looked at him, and Marcus felt his breath catch in his throat. Its eyes were gold, pure molten gold, and they held an intelligence that made his skin prickle with something he could not name. The creature was thin, desperately thin, and Marcus could see its ribs pressing against its scales. And it was shivering despite the warm air from the vent. "Hey there," Marcus said softly, keeping his voice low and gentle. "Where did you come from, little one?" The creature watched him but did not move, and Marcus noticed that its legs were trembling with exhaustion or fear, or both. He had heard stories about the Drakkari, the ancient dragon-like species that ruled 3-star systems with fire and terror, and he knew they kept exotic pets as status symbols. Strange creatures from 100 different worlds. This thing must have escaped from one of the trading ships, he thought. Some rich alien's pet that had slipped away and gotten lost in the station's endless corridors. "You must be hungry," Marcus said. And he went to his small kitchen and opened his food stores. He did not have much because technicians did not earn much, but he found a packet of nutrient paste that was meant for protein supplementation, and he squeezed it into a small bowl when he returned to the balcony. The creature had not moved, but its golden eyes tracked his every step with sharp attention. Marcus set the bowl down slowly, carefully, and then backed away to give the creature space. For a long moment, nothing happened, and Marcus wondered if the creature was too afraid or too weak to eat. Then it moved, faster than he expected, and it buried its face in the bowl and ate with a desperate hunger that made Marcus's heart ache. "Poor thing," he murmured. "When did you last eat?" The creature finished the paste in seconds and looked up at him, and Marcus could have sworn he saw something like gratitude in those golden eyes. He gave it more paste, and then some water in a small dish, and the creature consumed everything he offered. The next morning, Marcus reported the creature to station security because he knew that was the right thing to do. And somewhere out there, someone was probably looking for their lost pet. the security officer was aboard. Human woman who ran a cursory scan and checked the missing property reports and then shrugged. "Nothing in the system," she said. "No ownership tags, no missing pet reports. Nothing. So what do I do with it?" Marcus asked. "Release it into the maintenance tunnels," the officer said. "Or space it if you want. It is just an animal." Marcus did not release it into the tunnels where it would starve. And he certainly did not space it instead. He went to the market level of the station and spent a week's worth of savings on real fish protein. Actual fish that had been frozen and shipped from Earth at ridiculous cost. That evening when he came home, the creature was waiting for him on the balcony, and when Marcus set down the fish, it ate with the same desperate hunger as before. "I'm going to call you Sable," Marcus said as he watched the creature eat. "Because of your scales, you see. They are dark like sable fur." Sable looked up at him and made a soft sound, almost like a chirp. And Marcus smiled for the first time in a very long while. Every evening after that, Sable was there, waiting on the balcony. And every evening Marcus fed her the best food he could afford. He told himself he was just being kind to a lost animal, that someone would eventually come looking for her, that this was temporary, but deep down, in a place he did not like to examine too closely, Marcus knew the truth. He was lonely, desperately lonely. And Sable was the first living thing in 6 years that seemed happy to see him, and that, more than anything else, was why he kept feeding the strange creature with golden eyes. He had no idea what he had found. No idea what forces were already in motion across the galaxy. No idea that his simple act of kindness would change everything. He was just a man feeding a stray on his balcony. And for now, that was enough. 6 weeks passed, and Sable grew. Marcus noticed at first in small ways. The way she seemed heavier when she climbed onto his lap. The way her head reached higher when she stood on her back. Legs to greet him. He told himself it was just proper nutrition doing its work. That she had been so starved when he found her that of course she would fill out once. She started eating regularly, but deep down he knew that cats, or whatever Sable was, did not grow this fast. She was the size of a medium dog now. Her scales gleaming with health, her golden eyes brighter than ever. And Marcus had to buy larger bowls for her food and water. He also noticed that she was smart. Far smarter than any animal he'd ever known when he spoke to her. She tilted her head and watched his mouth as if she was trying to understand every word. And sometimes she would make soft sounds in response. Chirps and trills that almost seemed like she was answering him. "You understand me, do you not?" Marcus asked her one evening as they sat together on the balcony. Sable looked at him and made a low humming sound. And Marcus laughed, even though a small part of him felt a chill run down his spine. He started talking to her about everything. Not because he expected her to understand, but because he had been silent for so long that the words poured out of him like water from a broken dam. He told her about his wife Elena, how they had met at a university on Earth, how she had laughed at his terrible jokes and made him feel like he was the most important person in the world. He told her about the sickness that had taken Elena away, how he had watched her fade day by day while doctors shook their heads and insurance companies denied his claims. He told her about selling their home and their memories and buying a ticket to nowhere. Running away from a planet that had taken everything from him. Sable would curl against his chest while he spoke, her scales warm against his skin. And she would make that humming sound that was almost like purring. "I am glad you are here," Marcus whispered to her one night. "I did not realize how alone I was until you showed up." Sable pressed her head against his chin. And Marcus felt tears prick at his eyes for the first time in years as the weeks went on. Marcus began to notice strange things happening around his apartment. The heating system seemed to adjust itself to Sable's preferences, growing warmer when she was cold and cooler when she was too hot. And Marcus knew he had not programmed it to do that. Small objects moved when Sable stared at them. A cup sliding across the table, a blanket unfolding itself. A door opening without being touched. Marcus told himself he was imagining things, that he was tired from work and his mind was playing tricks on him. But he could not shake the feeling that something extraordinary was happening. The incident with the Kreth trader confirmed his suspicions. The Kreth were a species of large reptilian beings who were known for their bad tempers and their love of strong drink. And one of them lived a few doors down from Marcus. One night, the Kreth came home drunk and angry, and for reasons Marcus never understood. He decided to force his way into Marcus's apartment. Marcus heard the pounding on his door and the slurred threats, and he was reaching for his emergency communicator when Sable moved. She leaped off his lap and stood facing the door, her scales bristling, her golden eyes blazing with an inner fire that Marcus had never seen before. Then she hissed. It was not a normal hiss, not the sound a cat or a lizard would make, but something deeper and more terrible. A sound that seemed to resonate in Marcus's bones and make the air itself vibrate. Through the door, Marcus heard the Kreth scream, a high-pitched wail of pure terror. And then the sound of heavy footsteps running away. Sable turned back to Marcus and made her soft humming sound. And then she climbed back onto his lap, as if nothing had happened. Marcus sat very still for a long time, his heart pounding, his mind racing. "What are you?" he finally whispered. Sable just looked at him with those golden eyes and said nothing. A few days later, Marcus noticed the wings. They were small at first, just 2 bumps on Sable's back that he had assumed were part of her normal anatomy. But now they were growing, unfurling like leaves in springtime. They were beautiful. Delicate membranes of black and violet stretched over thin bones, and when Sable spread them wide, they caught the light from the stars outside and shimmered like captured galaxies. Marcus stared at her for a long time, and Sable stared back, and something passed between them that Marcus could not put into words. "You are not a cat," he said softly. "You never were you?" Sable made a sound that was almost sad, almost apologetic, and she pressed her head against his hand. "It is okay," Marcus said, and he meant it. "I do not care what you are. You are still my friend." He did not ask more questions because he was afraid of the answers. Afraid that knowing the truth would somehow break the spell and take Sable away from him. He had lost so much already, and he could not bear to lose her too. One evening, Marcus came home to find Sable on the balcony's edge, her wings spread wide, staring out at the stars with an expression he had never seen before. She looked like she was about to fly away, about to leave him alone again, and Marcus felt his heart clench with fear. "Sable?" he called softly. She turned to look at him, and in her golden eyes he saw a war being fought, a choice being made. Then she made a soft keening sound, almost like a sigh, and she folded her wings and came back inside. She climbed onto his lap and pressed against him, and Marcus held her tight and did not ask why she had stayed. He was just grateful that she had. He did not know that far across the galaxy, something terrible was hunting for her, burning worlds and slaughtering thousands in its desperate search. He did not know that time was running out. All he knew was that he loved this strange creature who had appeared on his balcony, and that for the first time since Elena died, he did not feel alone. That would have to be enough. 12,000 light years away from Kepler Station, a world burned. The planet had been called Vareth Prime, home to 3 billion souls who had lived peaceful lives under warm blue skies. And now it was nothing but ash and fire, and screaming Empress Sirathax of the Drakari stood in the flames and felt nothing. She was magnificent and terrible. 15 feet of scaled fury, with horns that curved like crescent moons and eyes that glowed like volcanic pits. And when she roared, the very air seemed to catch fire. "Where is she?" she demanded, her voice shaking the burning buildings around her. "Where is my daughter?" The rebel leader knelt before her, broken and bleeding, and he shook his head with the last of his strength. "We do not know," he gasped. "She was taken. She escaped. We lost her in the transfer." Sirithax seized him with one massive clawed hand and lifted him to her face. And her breath washed over him like the heat from a furnace. "You stole my heir," she snarled. "My only daughter, the last viable egg of my bloodline. And you lost her?" "We wanted leverage," the rebel choked out. "We wanted to force you to free our people, but she was too young, too small. She slipped away, and we could not find her." Sirithax closed her fist, and the rebel leader became a memory she turned to her generals. Her massive wings spreading wide enough to block out the flames behind her. And her voice was cold as the void between stars. "Find her," she commanded. "Burn every station, search every ship, tear apart every corner of this galaxy until you find my daughter. And bring me the heads of anyone who stands in your way." The Drakari fleet spread out like a plague across the stars. They were the most feared force in the known galaxy. Thousands of warships crewed by beings who had mastered fire and fury before humans had learned to walk upright. And they showed no mercy to anyone who could not help them. Station after station fell silent. The Drakari would arrive, demand information about a small creature with shifting scales and golden eyes, and when nobody could provide answers, they would leave nothing but wreckage behind. Rumors spread faster than the fleet itself. "The Dragon Queen has gone mad." People whispered, "Her grief has become a fire that will consume us all." Merchants changed their routes to avoid Drakari space. Diplomats fled their posts, and entire colonies evacuated before the flames could reach them on Kepler Station. Life continued as normal for a while. The station was far from Drakari territory, deep in neutral space where no empire held sway. And most residents believed they were safe from the carnage sweeping across the galaxy. Marcus heard the stories like everyone else. Fragments of news that filtered through the trade networks and gossip channels. Tales of fire and death and a mother's unstoppable rage. "Can you believe it?" his coworker asked one day as they tended the algae vats. "The Dragon Queen is burning whole worlds just to find one lost creature." "What creature?" Marcus asked, and he felt a strange coldness settle in his stomach. "Her daughter," the coworker said. "Apparently she was the last of the royal bloodline, stolen by rebels and lost somewhere in space. And now Sirithax will not rest until she finds her." Marcus thought about Sable, about her shifting scales and golden eyes and the wings that grew larger every day. And he told himself it was just a coincidence. There were probably thousands of creatures in the galaxy with scales and golden eyes. And just because the timing matched did not mean anything. But that night when he came home, he looked at Sable differently. She was the size of a large dog now, her wings fully formed and beautiful. And when she looked at him, Marcus saw something in her eyes that he had not noticed before. Longing, perhaps, or guilt, or the weight of secrets too heavy to share. "You can tell me," he said softly as she curled beside him on the balcony. "Whatever it is, you can tell me." Sable made a sound he had never heard before, something between a whimper and a cry, and she pressed herself against him as if she was trying to hide from the universe itself. Marcus held her and did not ask again. Weeks that followed were strange and tense. As more and more refugees arrived at Kepler Station with stories of Drakari attacks, they spoke of an empress gone mad with grief, of a mother who would burn the galaxy to find her child. And Marcus listened with a growing sense of dread that he could not explain. He looked at Sable and wondered, but he could not bring himself to ask the question that burned in his mind. Then the news came that the Drakari fleet had entered the sector. Panic swept through the station like wildfire, and half the docked ships fled within hours, their captains preferring to take their chances in open space rather than face the Dragon Queens. Marcus stayed because he had nowhere else to go and because he could not leave Sable behind. "It will be okay," he told her as they sat on the balcony and watched the fleeing ships. "They are probably just passing through. Sable looked at him, and in her golden eyes Marcus saw something that looked terribly like goodbye. 3 days later, a single Drakari scout ship docked at Kepler Station. And Empress Sirathax herself walked its corridors. She could feel her daughter's presence like a beacon in the darkness, calling to her across the bond that connected all Drakari mothers to their young. And after 8 months of searching and burning and grieving, she had finally found her soldiers moved ahead of her, their armor gleaming like black glass, their weapons hot with contained fire. And anyone who did not move aside quickly enough was cut down without a word. The Empress followed the bond through the station's winding corridors, past the market level and the residential blocks, up to a small apartment in a section where the working class lived. She stopped in front of a door marked with a simple nameplate Mchun. Hydroponics division inside. She could feel her daughter's heartbeat. Alive and strong and so close after all these months of agony, she could also feel something else. Something small and warm and impossibly fragile. A human Sirathax bared her teeth and reached for the door. Marcus came home from work to find his corridor filled with soldiers. They were Drakari, unmistakably so, their scales gleaming beneath armor that looked like it had been forged from obsidian and starfire. And they held weapons that hummed with barely contained destruction. His neighbors' doors were closed and locked, and Marcus could feel terrified eyes watching him through peepholes as he walked past the soldiers toward his apartment. One of them grabbed his arm, claws digging into his flesh, and Marcus gasped in pain. "This is the one?" The soldier asked in a voice like grinding stone. "He lives here," another confirmed. "He is the keeper." The word dripped with contempt, and Marcus felt his heart hammering against his ribs as they dragged him toward his own front door. The door had been torn from its frame, and inside his small apartment stood a being that made Marcus's mind struggle to comprehend what he was seeing. She was enormous, filling the space from floor to ceiling, her horns nearly scraping the metal above, and her scales shimmered with the deep red of cooling lava. Her wings were folded against her back, but still seemed to take up half the room. And her eyes burned with a fire that Marcus could feel on his skin, even from across the threshold. Empress Sirathax, the Dragon Queen, the most powerful being in 3-star systems, was standing in his living room, and Sable was standing between them. "You dare!" the Empress seethed, and her voice shook the walls and rattled the fixtures and made Marcus's teeth ache. "You dare keep my heir in a cage?" Marcus looked at Sable, at the creature he had fed and loved and talked to for months. And Sable looked back at him with those golden eyes that he suddenly realized were exactly like her mother's. "I thought she was a cat," Marcus said quietly. The words came out before he could stop them. Simple and honest and completely inadequate for the situation. And he expected the Empress to kill him on the spot for his insolence instead. Something shifted in the enormous dragon's expression. A flicker of confusion breaking through the rage. "A cat?" she repeated, as if she had never heard anything so absurd. "A pet," Marcus clarified, his voice steadier than he felt. "A lost pet that appeared on my balcony. Starving and alone. I did not know. I swear I did not know what she was." Sirathax lunged forward, her jaws opening to reveal teeth longer than Marcus's forearm. And Marcus closed his eyes and thought of Elena and hoped that death would be quick, but the killing blow never came. Sable threw herself between them, crying out in a language Marcus did not understand. A series of roars and trills and keening sounds that echoed with power and desperation. The Empress stopped, her teeth inches from Marcus's face, and she stared at her daughter with an expression that Marcus could not read. What followed was an argument. Marcus understood none of the words, but he understood the tone perfectly. Sable was defending him, pleading with her mother, and Sirathax was listening despite the fury that still burned in her eyes. Minutes passed, or maybe hours. Marcus could not tell. And the soldiers watched in silence as the princess and the empress debated his fate in their ancient tongue. Finally, Scirithax pulled back and spoke in the common galactic language, her voice still hot but no longer volcanic. "She says you saved her life," the empress said slowly, and disbelief cracked through her words like ice breaking in springtime. "She says you found her starving and dying, and you gave her food when you had little, warmth when you were cold yourself." Marcus swallowed, but said nothing, afraid that any words would break whatever spell was keeping him alive. "She says you spoke to her," Scirithax continued. And now there was something else in her voice, something that might have been wonder. "Not as a pet, not as a possession, but as a companion. You shared your grief with her, your loneliness. You treated her as an equal. I did not know what she was," Marcus said again. "I just saw something alone and scared, and I wanted to help. But you must have suspected," the empress pressed. "Her wings, her abilities, the way she grew. You must have known she was not a mere animal." Marcus thought about all the strange things he had noticed and chosen to ignore. All the questions he had not asked because he was afraid of the answers. "I did not care what she was," he admitted. "She was my friend, and I did not want to lose her." Scirithax stared at him for a long moment, her volcanic eyes searching his face for deception or hidden motives. "She says she could have left at any time," the empress said softly, and her voice dropped to something that sounded almost vulnerable. "She says she stayed because she wanted to, because you made her feel safe and loved, because you never asked anything of her except her company." Marcus looked at Sable, at Princess Carethas of the Dracari Empire, and she looked back at him with eyes full of emotion that he now understood perfectly. "I was alone," Marcus said. "She was alone, we found each other. It was that simple." The empress was silent for a long time, and the soldiers shifted nervously as they watched their ruler process something that clearly defied everything she knew about the universe. Humans were supposed to be weak and short-lived and insignificant, creatures that flickered into existence and burned out within a century without accomplishing anything of permanence. They were not supposed to touch the heart of a Drutari princess. They were not supposed to make the daughter of an empress choose a cramped apartment over the palaces of 3 star systems, and yet this one had, with nothing but fish and kindness and the willingness to sit in silence with someone who needed company. "Why?" Scirithax finally asked, and the question seemed to cost her something. "Why did you help her when you had nothing to gain?" Marcus thought about the question, really thought about it, and when he answered, his voice was steady and true. "Because she was hungry," he said simply. "Because she was scared, because I could help. There does not need to be another reason." Scirithax looked at him as if she was seeing something she had never seen before, and Marcus held her gaze without flinching. Whatever happened next, he would not apologize for being kind. The Dracari did not understand humans for 10,000 years. They had watched the young species stumble through the stars, building their fragile colonies and their short-lived empires, and they had dismissed them as insignificant humans lived for less than a century, barely long enough to learn wisdom. And they possessed no great psychic powers, no biological immortality, no natural weapons worth fearing. They were soft and brief and unremarkable. And the Dracari had never bothered to learn more about them, but Empress Scirithax stood in a cramped apartment on a forgotten station and looked at a human who had done them impossible. He had earned the love of a Dracari princess, not through wealth or power or cunning, but through simple, stubborn kindness that asked nothing in return. "You could have sold her," Scirithax said, and her voice was quiet now, thoughtful. "When you realized what she was, you could have contacted us and demanded a fortune. We would have paid anything." "I did not want a fortune," Marcus said. "You could have used her as leverage," the Empress continued. threatened her safety to gain power or protection or whatever else you desired. I would never hurt her. Sirathax studied him with those volcanic eyes, searching for the lie, the hidden agenda, the secret motivation that must surely exist beneath his simple words. She found nothing but truth. I do not understand you, she admitted. And for the first time since her daughter had disappeared, something other than rage or grief flickered in her ancient heart. Marcus shrugged, a gesture that seemed almost comically human in the presence of such power. There is nothing to understand, he said. She needed help. I could help. That is all there is to it. Sirathax turned to look at her daughter, at Princess Carythas, who had been missing for 8 months and who now stood beside this unremarkable human as if he was the most important being in the universe. You would have returned to me. Eventually, the Empress said to her daughter, you are my heir, my bloodline. You belong with your people. Carythas made a soft sound and pressed against Marcus's side. And Sirathax understood what she was saying. Without words, she would return. Yes, but not because she was commanded to. And not forever. Part of her would always belong here, with the human who had fed her fish and talked to her about his dead wife, and never once asked her for anything but her. Sirathax felt something she had not felt in centuries. Humility. She had burned worlds to find her daughter, slaughtered thousands, shattered the peace of entire sectors. And in the end, her daughter had been here all along, safe and loved and happy in a way that all of Sirathax's palaces and treasures had never made her. Marcus Chun, the Empress said, and her voice rang with formal power. You have done the Drakari Empire a service beyond measure. Name your reward and it shall be yours. Marcus looked at her, then at Carythas, and the princess made a small encouraging sound. I do not want a reward, Marcus said. The soldiers behind him shifted in surprise, and even Sirathax seemed taken aback. You must want something, she insisted. A ship, a planet, wealth beyond counting. I will give you anything within my power to give. Marcus thought for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice was soft but certain. I would like to see her sometimes, he said. Carythas, I mean, if she wants to visit. I would like that. Sirathax stared at him as if he had sprouted a second head. He could have asked for anything. Anything at all, and he asked only for the occasional company of a friend. That is all? She asked. That is everything. Marcus replied. Sirathax made a decision then, one that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come. Marcus Chun, she declared, her voice carrying the weight of imperial decree. From this day forward, you are a protected being under Drakari law. Your life is sacred. Your safety is guaranteed. And any who harm you will face the full wrath of dragon fire. The soldiers dropped to one knee, acknowledging the unprecedented honor, and Marcus stood awkwardly in the middle of his ruined living room, unsure of how to respond. You did not need to do that, he said. I know, Sirathax replied, and something that might have been a smile crossed her terrifying features. But my daughter would never forgive me if I did not. The news spread across the galaxy like wildfire. The Dragon Queen, the terror of 3 star systems, had declared a human under her personal protection. Not a diplomat or a general or a person of any importance, but a simple hydroponic technician who had fed her daughter fish on his balcony. People struggled to make sense of it, to find the political angle or the hidden strategy. But there was none. Marcus Chun had been kind, and that kindness had moved an empire in the months that followed. Carythas returned to her people to begin her training as heir to the throne, but she visited Marcus often, sometimes arriving in a shuttle, and sometimes simply appearing on his balcony, as she had done that first night. She was larger now, nearly the size of a small spacecraft, and Marcus had to take a shuttle out to sit on her scales and watch the stars together. I miss you when you are gone, he told her one evening as they floated in the void. Outside the station, her voice echoed in his mind. A gift she had revealed shortly after the confrontation. A psychic bond that allowed them to speak without words. "I miss you," she said. "More than you know." "Your mother came by last week," Marcus said. And he smiled at the memory. "She pretended it was an official inspection. But I think she just wanted to check on me. Mother has changed," Kyrithis said, and there was wonder in her mental voice. "She talks about you often, about how you helped her see humans differently." Marcus laughed softly, still amazed at how his life had changed. "I was just feeding a stray cat," he said. "You were being human," Kyrithis replied. "And that is the most remarkable thing of all below them." Kepler Station glittered with lights, and beyond it the galaxy stretched out in infinite darkness and infinite possibility. The Dragon Queen had started leaving offerings on the balconies of human diplomats throughout her empire. Small gifts of food and precious metals. And when asked about it, she would say only that it was a tradition she had learned from a friend. Humans were no longer overlooked in Dracari space. They were no longer seen as soft and brief and unremarkable, but as beings capable of a kindness so pure that it could touch even the heart of a dragon. And it all started with a bowl of fish and a lonely man who had seen something small and scared and had chosen to help. Marcus leaned against Kyrithis' warm scales and watched the stars. And he thought about Elena and how she would have loved this strange, wonderful creature who had become his family. "Thank you," he said softly, "for staying that night, for choosing me." Kyrithis made a rumbling sound that was her version of a laugh, and her voice wrapped around his mind like a warm blanket. "Thank you for feeding me," she said. "Even though I was clearly not a cat." Marcus grinned and settled in to watch the ships drift by. And for the first time in many years, he felt completely at peace in a galaxy of ancient powers and star-spanning empires. It was humanity's oldest trait that had changed everything, not strength or cunning or ambition, but something far simpler: kindness, freely given, with no expectation of return. That was the human gift, and it would never be forgotten.